Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode of Dogman Stories YouTube channel. Now, I'd like to take this opportunity to explain I have been gone for about a month. I needed a break. My father passed away, my mother had a heart attack, so I've had a lot going on. But I've also been out on the road with my husband trying to clear my head. And I've learned a lot of interesting things while I've been out there. So tonight I would like to share my story with you guys. Now, you do know if you guys need me, you can always contact me at dogmanstories@gmail.com if you'd like to share your story or tell me about something that you've encountered that you don't want on the story, which is fine with me. And don't worry, I can keep a secret. If you tell me something and you don't want it on the show, it will never be heard. I'm sure some of you already know that. So, without further ado, I want to share my story with you. And the name of my story is called Beware of the Animals. Now, as many of you may know, my husband is a truck driver. Most of the time, he heads up north to Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Kentucky. Well, I decided to go with him about 4 or 5 times, and I kept noticing on this one particular road, it's more like a highway out in the country for trucks. It's a 2-lane highway. On one side of the road was all woods. You couldn't even hardly see through it. And I noticed that there was a sign that said area under surveillance. And on the other side, there was houses, but the houses were very odd. I mean, they were normal houses, something like our grandmothers would live in, fixed up, nice old houses. But I recognized that these houses had bars on the windows, and they had these odd looking things on the doors. Perhaps like at nighttime, they would come out and roll down some kind of metal thing over all the openings in their house, which I thought was really weird. Well, about 2 weeks after passing this same road, I got up the courage to ask my husband to pull off beside the road. And there isn't really anywhere an 18-wheeler can pull off, so we actually had to pull off the road about a mile away from these houses and walk back, which was very creepy. So we walked back up to somebody's house, and we finally got somebody to talk to us about the third house down. And I told them that we were looking to buy a house in the neighborhood. Now, I know I did lie, and I will explain why. The first two houses, I explained to them that I was doing a Dogman show, and I was just curious of the alarm systems and the measurements that they took to keep their house safe, and they basically just shut the door in my face. So when I got to the third house, I explained to the person that I was looking to buy a house in the neighborhood, and I was just curious about the crime rate. And they asked me why would I think there was crime, and I told them it's kind of weird that houses out in the country this far would have bars over their windows, bars over their doors. And for those of you who have been to mechanic shops or to the mall, you know how they got this giant rolled up steel cage above the door, and when they close, they pull it down. Well, some of these houses had them. And I asked them, I was like, is the crime that bad that you need that? Well, the person didn't seem to come off with any information at first, but offered us in for a cup of tea or something to drink. And I told them that we had parked about a mile and a half down the road. So they were more than happy to bring us in their house. And we sat there and talked about all kinds of other things. And then finally, they asked why we would want to move up in this area. And we told them, just to get away from the city life and this, that, and other. Well, finally, the old man come out and said we should stay in the city. that this is no place for us. And I was kind of curious, and I asked, why, sir? Why is this not a place for us? Do you think we don't fit in? And he kept looking nervous, and I noticed he kept paying attention to the time and looking out the windows and everything else. And, I was kind of getting nervous because I had to walk back down the road about a mile and a half. And he said to me, there are animals out here that can get into your house, and they're very deadly. And I was like, okay, well, are they bears or cougars? And he's like, no, no, no. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. And I totally ignored it. I didn't want to say nothing about my Dogman show because I was scared he would put me out. And then I thought to myself, I was like, well, how am I going to get this man to talk? So I told him, I said, sir, have you ever heard of a Dogman? And the reaction on his face told me he knew what I was talking about. But he asked me, where would you come up with something like that? And I told him, I said, sir, I've been studying Dogman in a different type of way that you might think. I'm not a research person. I'm just a YouTuber who has a Dogman show, and I've been thinking about moving up here where the action is, and I've been down this road many, many times, and I just think it's odd the way the houses are. And he said, young lady, let me tell you something right now. You don't want to move here, and let me tell you why. There are creatures of the night, they call them night creatures, that come and they try to get in the houses, and if you're not prepared, they will get in your house, and they may even kill you. And I was like, well, can you explain them to me? And he said, well, if I had to give it one name, I would call it a werewolf. And I'm like, well, what do they look like? And he said to me, young lady, you don't want to know what they look like. They are very scary because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I said, sir, why don't you move if it's that terrifying? And he was like, this is my home. And I be darned if these things are going to run me out. And he pointed over to the wall. And he had all kinds of guns. Any kind of gun you could think of. But looking at the guns, I was thinking to myself, that's not big enough. That one's not big enough. But he did have a 50 caliber, so hopefully he'll be okay. But he did tell me that about 15 years ago on that same road, a family moved in. And they didn't have, it was before the people put the bars and the chain link fence right up on their house, on their windows. The people had 2 young children. Well, one of the children went missing. Never found. Found clothes, shredded about a mile away from the house. But then, later on, about 2 months after that, the family didn't move, hoping the child would come back. Well, apparently, not saying it's the same one, but apparently a Dogman returned to that house, and the door was open. It was just a screen door. And it was probably, the man said it was probably about 8:30. It was a cool night, not too cold, not too hot. So that way, could let the breeze come through the door. Well, apparently, the Dogman came through the door. And the mother and the father and the child was in the bed. Well, they didn't get killed. But needless to say, they moved the next day. And they told the neighbors about it before they left. A lot of neighbors thought they were crazy until they started seeing these same animals. Now, apparently, from what he told me, there's more than one. And for the other side of the road to have signs up every 30 feet saying area surveillanced or beware of the animals. That's also another sign that's up about every 30 feet. Beware of the animals, area surveillanced. In case of an emergency, stay in your car. Those are the signs. Now keep in mind, we did park a mile and a half away. And it was starting to get a little dark. So we talked about the Dogman and stuff. And he kept looking and looking. He was so paranoid. And he's like, look, y'all have got to go. I've got to get my house prepped and shut down. And I was like, okay. He's like, I'll give y'all a ride. I was all for it. My husband said, no, we're fine. It's only about a mile down the road. I was very nervous. I've already encountered something. Don't want to do it again. Well, the old man didn't look too happy about that. So we went walking down the road, and I noticed he started shutting his doors and pulling down these little metal things on his windows and locking them with a master lock, which was really creepy to me. And then we started hearing rustling sounds as we got about a mile away. We still had about a half a mile to go. I was freaking out. My husband was like, oh, it's nothing, it's nothing. Well, all of a sudden, we hear a car come racing down the road. It was the old man. And he started yelling, get in, get in. So we got in. He races to our truck. And he said, don't you ever come back here at this time. You want to talk to me? You come back in the morning time about 9, 10 o'clock. Don't ever come back during the evening. I was like, yes, sir. So apparently there is something going on there. We got in our truck, got it started, and would you know, there was something in them woods. I don't know what it was, but there was something. And according to that local, it's the Dogman. Now, out of respect for everybody on that road who does not want no publicity, I will not tell you the name of the road. But I will tell you it is in Pennsylvania. And I will tell you it is in the Lichen Loop. After I did further research, I found out it is in the Lichen Loop. So apparently there is a whole pack of them living up there, and I just happen to be in their territory. So don't ever get out. If you go on this 2-lane road in Pennsylvania and you see signs that say area under surveillance, beware of animals, in case of an emergency, stay in your car. Now that was written in bold. Don't ever get out of the car. Now that's my story, and I'm going to do some more research, and I am going to go back and talk to that man. But until I do, don't try to go looking for what is already out there. So thank you, and good night, and we'll be back shortly with another show.